Good morning. Happy second Sunday in Advent. Would you turn with me, please, to John chapter 1. Children age 4 through first grade can be dismissed for children's worship. The reading from John 1 can be found in the Pew Bible on page 886. As we continue during this Advent season to look together at these opening verses of the Gospel of John, this passage that is often referred to as the prologue to John's Gospel. It's sort of a window through which we can understand everything that comes after it, that John is going to be saying in this Gospel, this message about Jesus, about what Jesus did, about what Jesus taught. Last week we looked at the first few verses. We focused in on this Word whom John says was in the beginning with God, who was God, and who through whom all things were made. Today we're going to be focusing on the whole theme here of light and darkness, the coming of the light. So I'll start in our reading at verse 1 and we'll read through to verse 9. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. This is the word of the Lord. Now, Lord Jesus, light of the world, you say that whoever follows you will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. We pray that you would use your word in our hearts today, that we might follow you in our lives more closely, that your light might be kindled within us, that we might be your witnesses as we live in you, in the world. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. John says to us here, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. And so it sort of got me thinking this week, what would life be like without light? What would life be like without light? So I did some reading earlier, and I wanted to see, earlier in the week, and I wanted to see what would happen if the sun were all of a sudden to burn out. Turns out that what would happen is all the sorts of things that you would think would happen, right? We wouldn't be in orbit around the sun anymore, and so we'd start flying in a straight line throughout space, and who knows where we'd end up. We would be in complete darkness in less than 9 minutes. The whole planet would be just totally dark, no light from the sun anywhere. And of course, if the sun wasn't there, the moon wouldn't be shining either. The planets that we see in the sky would also not be there anymore because the light wouldn't be reflecting off of them. We would freeze. Within the first year, the temperature of the planet would be, the average temperature would be negative 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Make you long for a day like today. And then over time, the average temperature of the planet would become negative 400 degrees. And so that's what we would be. We would be just a cold, dark ball of matter flying through space, not knowing where we're going. That's what life would be like without the sun. That's what life is like without light. In fact, you simply can't live without light, right? You cannot. And that's the way it is in the physical world. And John wants us to see, right, that is the way it is also in the spiritual world. You cannot live without light, without spiritual light. Goodness, truth, beauty, love, hope. We are like the earth without the sun, wandering aimlessly through space, cold, dark, and who knows where we will end up. Which is why the prophet Isaiah, in Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20, tells us, woe to those who change or who put darkness for light and light for darkness. Woe to those who put darkness for light and light for darkness. You know, what a sad picture, right? To be in complete darkness and think that you're in the light. And yet, that is what so much of life in this world often is, isn't it? You know, we have so many things that we trust in, and we think that they're going to bring light, but they leave us in darkness, right? You know, maybe the right economic system, maybe that's the thing. Maybe if we had the right economic system, our problems would be solved, right? Maybe the right philosophy, maybe if we had the right ethical principles, then the problems of the world would be healed. Maybe the right diet, maybe enough exercise, maybe the right medicine, maybe the right technology. And see, all those things are good, right? They're good, but in the end, where are we left? In the end, the darkness remains, does it not? None of those things have really solved our problem, nor can they. Nor can they. Why? Because just like the planet of Earth, we are not the light. We cannot create something that is not there. We are not the light. The solution to our problems does not lie within us, whether individually or collectively. We cannot bring light in the darkness. And now, here comes the Apostle John, saying to the world and to us here in this room today, look at my friend Jesus. You want to see the light? Look at my friend Jesus. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You know, I said this last week, but it really bears repeating here because I think it's just so important for us to keep in mind when we come to this text. Right? Jesus was John's friend. This book that we're looking at, the Gospel of John, is not a piece of philosophy. It's not a systematic theology textbook. This is a gospel, right? This is good news about a man whom John knew, a man whom John walked around with, talked with, got dirty and sweaty in the sun with, saw early in the morning when he first woke up, a man that John ate and drank with, a man that John saw every day. An amazing thing to think about, right? This man that John knew, saw, held, embraced. The first thing that he wants you and me to know about this man is this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. That's what we looked at last week. The second thing that John wants you and me to know about his friend Jesus is this: in him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness. He is the source of all light. He is the source of all light. So remember, what John is doing here in these first few verses of this gospel is he's pointing us back right to the beginning. Remember, I gave you last week that quote from T.S. Eliot: "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive at the beginning and know the place for the first time." John is pointing us back to the beginning so that in the light of the coming of Christ, we might know even the beginning for the very first time. We might know it fully, truly. Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Genesis 1 goes on to say this, Genesis 1:2, the earth was without form and void, or empty, and darkness was over the face of the deep. Again, that's earth without light. Right? Just a big, dark ball floating through space, formlessness, emptiness, darkness, no life. And then what happens in Genesis 1? Genesis 1:3, God speaks into the darkness, "Let there be light." And there was light. And then throughout the rest of the chapter, throughout Genesis 1, God keeps speaking, sending his word. And his word keeps bringing forth life, filling this formless void, that was formerly there, with life and light and fruitfulness. And so that's Genesis 1, or John 1, 3, and 4, right? All things were made through him. Without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. But now John wants us to see, right, that was the beginning. But now, verse 5, the light shines presently. The light shines in the darkness. You see, the world that this word that John is talking about has now come into is a world that is similarly covered in darkness like it was in the beginning. But it's darkness of a different kind, right? Spiritual darkness. Spiritual emptiness. The darkness of a world that is overtaken by sin and death, hatred, violence, deceit, disease. And without the light in such a world, life is impossible. And so just like in the original creation, so in the new creation, John is telling us. Just like in the original creation, so in the new creation, it begins with God sending into the world light to shine in the darkness. And this light, this one whom John is calling the Word, is the source of any light that's in the world. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. Everything that is good and true and beautiful, he is the source. You know, even when people create beautiful works of art or literature or music, you know, Da Vinci, Rembrandt, Bach, even when people give us these things, Shakespeare, right? That doesn't just evolve out of nowhere. Right? John wants to see that anything good that even you or I might do or create, he is the source of all of that light. Anything beautiful, anything true, the true light who enlightens everyone is the one who brings this about. So think about this, right? We live in a world of such inestimable beauty, don't we? I mean, all around us, so much beauty. Beauty in the creation, beauty that people can create. So much beauty everywhere. But at the same time, such horrible, horrible darkness surrounding us. Such horrible darkness. And see, in a world like this, in a world where goodness and truth and beauty exist really side by side, with things like hatred and violence and sickness and pain and death as we see all around us, in a world where people who share the very same nature, right, can commit such horrible atrocities as the Holocaust, but at the same time such incredibly beautiful things as the Sistine Chapel, right, in a world in which in the very same moment you'll have one family rejoicing over the incredible gift of new life, and in that very same moment, another family lamenting bitterly a horrible tragedy that has come upon him. In a world like this, how do you see these things and make any sense of it? Well, some people will say, right, that we need to see that the glass is half full, and so we should focus on the good. Right, things are really not that bad. Just focus on the good. The glass is half full. Some people will say, well, the glass is half empty. You know, why even continue? It's just so awful. The glass is half empty. Yeah, there are some pockets of hope here and there, but in the grand scheme of things, it's just awful. The message that John gives us is a message that says really both of those perspectives are wrong. The reality is that the glass is full, but the water is contaminated. The glass is full, but the water is contaminated. And by the mercy of God, by God's sheer mercy, the light shines in the darkness. By God's sheer mercy, he sends something that will take out the contamination that's in the water. By God's sheer mercy, the light is coming to drive the darkness away. And throughout history, you see, what God has been doing is he has been sort of sending down light, like rays and pockets into creation, giving light to a dark world that would otherwise descend into nothingness. That's what God has been doing throughout history. But ultimately, you see, He did it through the prophets. He does it in many different ways. But ultimately, you see, those pockets of light that come in from the outside in sort of spurts, those things are not enough to ultimately save us. Right? Because what had to happen for us to be saved was that the source of light, the source itself, had to come into the world and take out the darkness and drive it out from the inside. You see, sort of like if you have a jar in a dark room and you want that jar to be filled with light. If you just hold a light over top of the jar, what happens? Well, sure, some may peek through, but it'll still be darkness in there. There will be shadows. If you want to fill that jar with light completely and drive the darkness out, what do you need to do? You need to take a candle and drop it into the jar. You see, in the coming of Jesus Christ, that's what God did. He took the source of light itself, and put it into the cold, dark jar of this world. And so John goes on, verses 6 through 9, to say that there was a man sent from God whose name was John. This, by the way, is not John the Apostle who's writing this. He's talking here about, this is John the Apostle talking about another John, a guy we call John the Baptist. So there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to bear witness about the light, the true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. God was about to drop the candle into the jar, right? And John the Baptist was the guy that God sent into the world to tell everybody, hey, look at the candle. You see, in the ages leading up to the coming of Jesus Christ, God continually sent to his people prophets who were pointing to the coming of this light. They wrote things like this, Isaiah chapter 60, verses 1 through 3. Arise, shine, your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples, but the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory will be seen upon you, and nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. That was the message of the prophets throughout the ages. The light is coming. It's coming. And John the Baptist is the guy whom Jesus said was the greatest of all the prophets. The greatest. Why was John so great? He was great for one reason: his proximity to the light. That's why. John is the one guy in all of history, in all of this long line of prophets whom God sent into the world, who got to point his finger and say, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. John's sort of like Morpheus in the Matrix, right? Everybody's looking for the one, and John is the guy who was there to say, there he is! That's the one! Trust in him! Follow him! He will save us! That's John. What an awesome privilege, right? The world is languishing in darkness and death, and the Lord chooses you, of all people, to point people to the source of light and life. Man, I wish God would do that with me, don't you? Here's the thing. He has. He has. You see, you and I have the same exact calling as John. We have the same privilege as John the Baptist. In fact, we have a greater privilege. Because you see, while John the Baptist saw the light in front of him, what do you have? You have the light within you, don't you? Listen to this, 2 Corinthians 4, verses 6 and 7. A good one for you to memorize. 2 Corinthians 4, verses 6 and 7. For God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, Genesis 1:3, has shone in your hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. And then Paul says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay. We have this treasure in jars of clay, this light, so that the surpassing power, it may be clearly seen that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. You see, the very God who in the beginning spoke into the darkness and brought forth light out of nothing, looked and he saw the darkness of your heart. He saw the darkness of my heart, and he said, "Let there be light." And there was light. Amazing. God saw you and me empty, cold in the darkness like the earth floating around in space without the sun, and said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And like John the Baptist, you are now a witness to the light that has, in a sense, intruded into your world and lit you up. We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. You are not the light, but you do have the light. You are not the light, but you do have the light. And that's important to keep in mind, because how often we forget, how often we either think that I am the light or I don't have the light, right? We naturally tend in one of those two directions. And so, when you go into a dark room, what is the very first thing you do every single time? You look for the light switch, right? Why do you do that? It's because you know two things. First, you're not the one who's going to light up that room. The source of light is not you. Second, you know that there must be a light in there somewhere, right? And that's what we need to remember. We must remember both, I am not the light, but also I have the light. Don't just stand around and hope you start glowing. Point people to the light that is in you in the face of Jesus Christ. God has given you this precious treasure so that in your life you might be emptied of yourself more and more. So that you might be emptied of yourself and that you might be filled up more and more with His light as He works within you. And you see, what happens when this light of Jesus Christ comes into your life, you see what He does sort of is like a candle in a jar, right? His light disperses throughout everything. He illuminates every corner. The light gets all up in everything. Past, present, future. Even your past mistakes. Right? Even things that in the moment were just stuff that's filled with darkness. When He comes, He shines His light even into those things. Right? Even into those things that they're like, what in the world was going on there? What in the world was I thinking there? What in the world is all this about? When He comes, He illuminates all of those things. And showing this is part of what it means to be His witness. Right? To say, He is the light. Look at what He's done even with my darkness. Look at what He's done with my addiction to bring light to those who are struggling with an addiction. Look at what He's done even with my sorrow to bring light into the lives of those who are now in sorrow. Look at what He's done even with my sense of purposelessness. Purposelessness to now bring light into the lives of those who feel like there's no purpose to their existence. Look at what He's done with my struggles and my mistakes and my hurts and my failures and my disappointments. Beloved, what dark corners of your life might God be pointing to this morning and saying, "Let there be light." Praise Him for His mercy. This is what He does with us. And this is one of the reasons that I just love the symbolism, right, of lighting candles over Advent. Why candles? Why candles? Well, you see, the candles are there to remind us that the light shines in the darkness. And that there was a time in the world when this coming of the light was just like a flickering flame off in the distance. That's what the prophets saw. They just saw this glimmer of light off in the distance. And this reminds us of that, but they also remind us that's the way our lives will often feel, isn't it? Like, the light's there, but it's just so hard to see. It's just this little flame that's flickering in the distance because we still battle the darkness, don't we? And so at times it'll feel like the light, is just something that's so small and the slightest breeze might snuff it out. And we might lose hope. And in fact, we would lose hope if it were not for this one truth. The light shines in the darkness. and the darkness has not overcome it. Indeed, the darkness cannot overcome it, because the light that we are talking about is the source of all light, and he doesn't burn out. He does not burn out. You may feel like in your life, even maybe today, maybe you're feeling like, I'm burning out. I can't go anymore. Jesus does not burn out. Hold on to him. Don't lose hope. He says in John chapter 8, verse 12, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So, what do you do when you see the darkness around you? I want to close here by just highlighting two things that God has given you when you see the darkness. He's given you lips, and he's given you love. Lips and love. He's given you lips. The great philosopher Buddy the Elf once said, the best way to spread Christmas cheer is what? Singing loud for all to hear. I say that half jokingly, right? But seriously, he's given you lips. Use those lips that he's given you to speak and to sing words of light and life and joy and peace and hope and love, especially this time of year, right? Especially throughout your life, but especially this time of year when people are just so bogged down in busyness and craziness and running from one thing to the next. What's going on? And yet, in the midst of all of the busyness, there's just so much emptiness and darkness and brokenness and pain. Remember that this light that we are talking about, beloved, is the Word. Right? He is the perfect expression of who God is. In Jesus, God is saying to the world, you want to know me? You want to know me? Look at my Son. Look at my Son. You want to know the source of light and life and truth and beauty and love? Look at my Son. He is the Word. He is God's communication about himself. And like God, you see, we also have words that communicate something about ourselves, don't we? This is what John calls light. Whenever our words reveal to those outside of us something that is true. It's part of what it means to be made in the image of God. But then there's a flip side of that, isn't there? The flip side of that is that we can also use our words to bring darkness. This is one of the ways the image of God has been twisted within us. We use our words to deceive and to cover the truth, to twist the truth. Think about what our words do today. Brothers and sisters, we live in a world of noise, and the noise is darkness. The noise is darkness, and we are surrounded by it. We are drowning in an abyss of fake news, of meaningless jargon. And just like the creation in the beginning in Genesis 1, right, darkness covers the face of the deep. A proliferation of syllables without substance. That's the world in which we live. And we are all of us both complicit in this and victims of it, aren't we? But now, beloved, look at what God has done. In Jesus, God shines into the darkness. God in Christ is speaking light into the darkness of our noise, and saying, let there be light. And he has given you the privilege of speaking in him words of light. God is saying, hear my word, look at my Son, and live and shine, and you are witnesses to the light. Use your lips to speak light into the darkness. Second, he's given you love. He's given you love. 1 John 2, 9 and 10 says, whoever, we heard this earlier in the service, whoever says he is in the light but hates his brother is still in the darkness. Whoever loves his brother abides in light, and in him there is no cause for stumbling. In a world that is just so filled with the darkness of hatred and violence, brothers and sisters, the way that we show above all others that we are children of the light is by the love that we have for one another. It's the way above all others that you shine the light, because it is through love that the light shines. The brightness of love, beloved, is seen in the darkest of places. Think about Jesus, the personification of light and love. In this is love, John says. Not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to die for our sins. When the light appeared among us, what was it that drove him here? It was love. It was love that propelled him downward into this cold, dark world, downward into our flesh, downward into a life of suffering, downward to the cross, downward into the deepest darkness of death itself, so that from the inside of even death he might shine with his radiant light of life and do away with the darkness of death once and for all. It was love that drove him there. And it is love that drives him even now into your heart to shine with his light. And it is love, beloved, that will cause that light that is now within you to seek dark places to shine. At a hospital bed, into the life of somebody who's struggling with addiction, into the life of somebody in the grips of sorrow and despair. It is love that will drive you there. Without love, you cannot. With love, you will. And so if your love is lacking and the light is growing dim, what do you need to do? You need only go back to the source. Thanks be to God. You are not the light. He is. That's the message of Christmas. You are not the light. He is. You don't need to create out of nothing something that isn't there. You need only lay hold of what God has already given you. He has come. He is with you. And he is coming again. This is the message of Christmas. And when he comes, on that day when he comes again, here is a picture of what it will be like. Revelation 21, verse 23. And the city has no need of sun, no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God himself gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. How brilliant will that day be? Until that day, when you continue struggling with the darkness, don't stop praying this prayer. It's a prayer of our closing hymn that we'll sing in just a bit. O come, Emmanuel. O come. Let's pray it. Pray it with me now. O come, thou dayspring from on high, and cheer us by thy drawing nigh. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and death's dark shadows put to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Praise God.